The woman who stepped off the wagon wasn't the one in the photograph. Caleb Hart had memorized every detail of that picture. Fair hair, pale skin, the careful smile of a woman seeking security. But the figure standing in the snow wore dark silk, her black hair pinned tight, her eyes scanning the frozen valley like she was reading danger in every shadow. She wasn't lost, she wasn't confused. And when those eyes found his, Caleb saw something that made his blood run cold, fear mixed with absolute determination. "Mr. Hart," she said quietly, "we need to talk. Now, before they realize I'm here." If you're watching from anywhere in the world, drop your city in the comments below. I want to see how far this story travels. And if you love a good frontier tale where nothing is what it seems, hit that like button and stay with me until the end. This Christmas Eve is about to get dangerous. The wind carried voices across the frozen valley, sharp as broken glass. Caleb Hart stood beside his wagon at the edge of the territorial station, one hand resting on the rifle tucked beneath the driver's seat, the other holding a photograph so worn the edges had gone soft as cloth. He'd looked at that picture every night for 3 months, studying the woman who'd agreed to become his wife, trying to imagine what her voice might sound like, whether she'd find his silence comfortable or unsettling. The letters had been extraordinary, intelligent, thoughtful, filled with observations about books and weather and the small dignities of daily life. She'd written about loneliness without self-pity, about hope without sentimentality. Reading them had felt like discovering water in drought country, unexpected and necessary. Now the stage was late, the temperature dropping towards something brutal, and Caleb was beginning to wonder if she'd changed her mind somewhere between Kansas and Wyoming territory. The wagon appeared first as movement against white landscape, then as shape, then as the particular rattle of iron wheels over frozen ground. Caleb straightened, his heart doing something uncomfortable behind his ribs. He'd faced down claim jumpers and survived 2 winters that killed half the cattle in the territory, but the prospect of meeting this woman made his hands unsteady. The driver pulled up in a spray of snow and ice. "Hart? That's right. Got a passenger for you." The driver's voice carried an odd note, not quite warning, not quite amusement. "Says she's expected." The door opened. The woman who emerged was small-boned and precise in her movements, wrapped in a dark cloak that looked too fine for frontier travel. Black hair pulled back severely, skin the color of pale amber, eyes that swept the valley with the practiced assessment of someone accustomed to evaluating threat. Nothing like the photograph. Caleb's hand moved toward the rifle before he caught himself. "There's been a mistake." "No mistake, Mr. Hart." Her English was flawless, barely accented, the kind of careful pronunciation that came from learning languages as tools rather than inheritance. "I'm exactly who you're looking for, though not in the way you think." She glanced at the driver, then back at Caleb, and lowered her voice. "Please, take me to your ranch. I'll explain everything, but we can't talk here." "Ma'am, I don't know who you are or what kind of situation you're running from, but I'm expecting—" "Sarah Mitchell isn't coming." The woman's voice cut clean through his protest. "The woman whose letters you treasured, whose photograph you carried. She's in danger. Her brother is in danger. And if you don't listen to me right now, you'll be joining them before morning." The driver was watching with interest now, leaning forward to catch every word. 2 other men had emerged from the station, their attention sharpening. Caleb felt the weight of scrutiny, the way gossip spread across frontier towns like fire through dry timber. The woman seemed to read his hesitation. She reached into her cloak and produced an envelope, pressed it into his hand. "The 3rd letter you received mentioned a scar on your horse's left foreleg, how he favored it when the weather turned cold. No one else would know that except someone who'd actually read your replies. The replies you sent to Sarah Mitchell." Caleb looked down at the envelope. His own handwriting stared back at him, the letter he'd sent 6 weeks ago, sealed and posted to an address in Kansas. Unopened. "How did you—" "Because I'm the one who wrote every letter you received." Her eyes held his, dark and fierce and desperate. "Every word about books and loneliness and hope. Sarah Mitchell exists. She's real. But those letters? Those were mine. And now she's been taken because of them. And you're about to be framed for a crime you didn't commit. And if we don't leave right now, neither of us will live long enough to stop what's coming." The wind picked up, driving snow horizontal across the valley. Caleb's mind worked through possibilities, weighing truth against deception, calculating risk. The woman stood perfectly still, waiting, her breath forming small clouds in the freezing air. Finally, he gestured toward the wagon. "Get in." She moved immediately, climbing up with the efficiency of someone accustomed to harsh travel. Caleb tossed coins to the driver, more than necessary, enough to discourage questions, and swung up beside her. "This conversation better be damn convincing," he said, releasing the brake. "It will be. I brought evidence." She pulled the cloak tighter. "My name is Lin May, and the people who orchestrated this scheme are expecting you to be arrested before dawn." The ride back to the ranch took 40 minutes through increasingly brutal weather. Lin May sat in silence, her attention fixed on the landscape, occasionally glancing back the way they'd come. Caleb found himself studying her profile, the tension in her jaw, the way her hand stayed hidden in the cloak, probably wrapped around something small and dangerous. "You armed?" he asked. "Yes." "Good." He guided the horses around a drift. "Anyone follows us from town, you'll need it." "No one will follow yet. They're waiting for you to bring me to the ranch first. The trap works better that way." "What trap?" "The one where you're found with a kidnapped woman and convenient evidence of correspondence proving premeditation. Where your land gets seized for criminal activity and sold at auction to the highest bidder, who just happens to be the man who designed the whole scheme." She turned to look at him directly. "Tell me, Mr. Hart, has anyone approached you recently about selling your property? Someone offering generous terms, perhaps commenting on how isolated you are, how difficult it must be to manage alone?" Caleb's hands tightened on the reins. 3 weeks ago, a businessman from Cheyenne had made exactly that offer. Generous terms, immediate payment, concern about the challenges of frontier solitude. "How did you know?" "Because I kept his books. I know every property he's targeted, every family he's destroyed, every scheme he's orchestrated." Lin May's voice carried bitter precision. "Marcus Thornton owns half of Cheyenne through debt and blackmail. He learned about the railroad route 6 months before the public announcement. This valley will be worth 10 times its current value once the tracks come through. He wants your land, Mr. Hart, and he's willing to destroy whoever stands in his way." The ranch appeared ahead, a solid shape against white darkness. Caleb had built it himself over 5 years of brutal work, good timber, careful construction, positioned to catch sunlight and shelter from northern wind, barns, corrals, a cabin with real glass windows, evidence of a life built with intention and care. Lin May studied it as they approached. "You live alone?" "Yes." "Good. Fewer people to endanger." She waited until he'd stopped the wagon, then climbed down with the same precise efficiency. "May we go inside? The evidence I brought is fragile, and we don't have much time." The cabin was cold but clean, organized with the careful minimalism of a man accustomed to solitude. Caleb built up the fire while Lin May removed her cloak, revealing a traveling dress that had once been fine but showed signs of hard use. She carried a leather satchel, which she set carefully on the table. "Start talking," Caleb said, feeding wood into the stove. Lin May opened the satchel and withdrew a ledger bound in dark leather. "Marcus Thornton hired me 5 years ago to manage his private accounts. I was good with numbers, discreet, grateful for the work. I didn't ask questions about the nature of his business." She opened the ledger to a marked page. "This is the first property acquisition I helped facilitate. A widow with 3 children, late on loan payments. Thornton bought the debt, accelerated the terms, foreclosed within 6 weeks. The family was destitute." She turned pages, her fingers tracing columns of figures. "This one was a rancher with a drinking problem. Thornton supplied the whiskey, then engineered a situation where the man appeared to assault a young woman. Criminal charges, public disgrace, property seizure. The assault was staged. The woman was paid. The rancher hanged himself in his cell before trial." Caleb felt something cold settle in his chest. "How many?" 17 properties in 3 years, some through debt, some through blackmail, some through outright fraud. I documented everything because I believed someday I might need proof." Lin May's voice stayed steady, clinical. "Then 3 months ago, Thornton learned about the railroad. Everything accelerated. He started targeting larger properties, planning multiple acquisitions simultaneously, including yours. What does this have to do with the letters? With Sarah Mitchell? Lin May closed the ledger, her hands resting flat against the leather. Thornton discovered you'd placed an advertisement for a mail-order bride. He saw an opportunity. He owned a significant debt held by Sarah Mitchell's father, a farmer who'd taken loans to survive drought. The debt was legitimate, but Thornton manipulated the terms to make it unpayable. She reached into the satchel again, produced a bundle of letters tied with ribbon. He offered Mr. Mitchell a bargain. His daughter would correspond with you, accept your proposal, travel to Wyoming as your bride. Once she arrived, evidence would be planted suggesting you'd misrepresented yourself, that she'd been lured under false pretenses. She would claim coercion, abuse, fear for her safety. You would be arrested. Your land would be seized as evidence in a criminal case. When you were eventually acquitted, if you survived that long, the property would have already been sold to cover legal costs and fines. Caleb stared at the letters, recognition hitting like physical force. The handwriting was identical to the photograph's accompanying note, but the words, the thoughts, the soul behind them, those belonged to someone else entirely. You wrote them, he said quietly. Yes. Lin May met his eyes without flinching. Thornton ordered me to create correspondence that would convince you of Sarah's suitability. I was to make you believe she was intelligent, thoughtful, genuinely interested in partnership rather than mere transaction. The goal was to ensure you'd complete the marriage without suspicion. But you actually wrote what you believed, what you felt. Something flickered in her expression, surprise, perhaps, or recognition. I wrote honestly because I didn't see the point in lying about ideas and observations. The deception was in the signature, not the content. Caleb picked up the letters, feeling their weight. Months of careful correspondence, building something he'd believed was real. What went wrong? Sarah's father discovered the full scope of the plan. He realized Thornton intended not just to use his daughter, but to implicate her in fraud. When he tried to back out, Thornton had them both taken. Lin May's voice hardened. Sarah and her younger brother, Thomas, they're being held at an abandoned mining camp north of here, supposedly for their own protection, while the debt is renegotiated. But the real purpose is leverage. When you're arrested tomorrow, Thornton will ensure Sarah provides testimony against you. If she refuses, her brother suffers. Tomorrow? The warrant has already been issued. A territorial marshal will arrive at dawn with evidence of fraudulent correspondence and intent to traffic women across state lines. You'll be arrested, your property searched. Documents will be discovered proving you paid Sarah's travel expenses with promises of marriage while concealing your true circumstances, which they'll claim include violence, instability, criminal history, all fabricated, all carefully documented. Caleb stood slowly, his mind racing through implications. They can't forge my entire history. People in town know me. They don't need to convince everyone, just enough to justify seizure and arrest. Once you're in custody, Thornton controls the narrative. Lin May opened the ledger again, pointed to entries. He owns the territorial judge. The sheriff owes him money. The newspaper editor is on his payroll. By the time anyone questions the charges, your land will be gone. Why tell me? If you're part of this, I was part of it. Her voice cut sharp. Past tense. I kept records because I knew someday Thornton's schemes would collapse. I thought I could simply leave, disappear when the timing was right. But when I learned he'd taken Sarah and Thomas, that he planned to use a child as leverage, she stopped, drawing breath. I've facilitated terrible things, Mr. Hart. I've helped destroy families and lives. I told myself I was just keeping numbers, that I wasn't responsible for what the numbers represented. I was wrong. She met his eyes, and Caleb saw the weight of those years in her expression. I can't undo what I've done. But I can stop what's coming. I can save Sarah and Thomas. I can expose Thornton's operation before he destroys anyone else. That's why I came here instead of running. That's why I brought evidence instead of warnings. Because you're the only person in this territory with something Thornton wants badly enough that stopping him might actually matter. The fire crackled in the silence that followed. Outside, wind drove snow against the windows, the storm intensifying. Caleb thought about the letters, about the woman he'd imagined meeting, about the future he'd carefully constructed in his mind, all of it built on lies. But the words in those letters, those had been real. The intelligence, the honesty, the careful hope behind every sentence. "If what you're saying is true," he said slowly, "coming here makes you a target too. Thornton knows you have evidence. He knows I disappeared. He doesn't know I came to you yet." Lin May's hand moved to her cloak pocket. "I left a letter in my room suggesting I'd fled to San Francisco, but he'll figure out the truth quickly enough. We have maybe 12 hours before he realizes I've warned you." "Then why not just take that evidence to the territorial governor or federal authorities?" "Because Sarah and Thomas will be dead before any investigation begins. Thornton has contingencies. The moment he suspects exposure, he'll eliminate witnesses." She pulled a small derringer from her pocket, checked the mechanism with practiced ease. "The only way to save them is to act first, tonight, before the trap closes." Caleb studied her. This small, precise woman who'd orchestrated deception with the same careful attention she now applied to survival. "You're asking me to trust someone who lied to me for 3 months?" "No." Lin May tucked the derringer away. "I'm asking you to trust the evidence. The ledger can be verified. The schemes can be proven. My role in them is documented. I'm not claiming innocence or asking for absolution. I'm offering you the truth and the means to fight back. What you do with that is your choice." She was right. The evidence mattered more than her history. But Caleb found himself asking the question anyway. "Those letters, the ones you wrote, were any of those observations actually yours? Or was it all performance?" Lin May was quiet for a moment, her gaze distant. "I grew up translating between languages and cultures, Mr. Hart. Interpretation was survival. When Thornton ordered me to write letters to a lonely rancher, I researched what such letters should contain. I studied examples, analyzed patterns. But somewhere in the process," she paused, choosing words carefully, "the loneliness I described wasn't fictional. The hope wasn't manufactured. I wrote what I knew, what I felt. I just signed someone else's name to it." "Why?" "Because I didn't believe someone like you would want letters from someone like me." She said it matter-of-factly, without self-pity. "The deception was practical. It served Thornton's purpose. I told myself that's all it was." Outside, something moved in the darkness, quick shadow against white landscape. Caleb's hand went to his rifle, but the shape resolved into a deer, spooked by the storm. Still, the movement sent adrenaline through his system, sharpening his focus. "If we're going to do this," he said, "I need to understand the full situation. Where exactly is this mining camp? How many men does Thornton have guarding Sarah and Thomas? What kind of resistance should we expect?" Lin May returned to the satchel, produced a hand-drawn map. "The camp is here, about 12 miles north. Abandoned silver claim, building still intact. Thornton keeps 4 men on site. Supposed security for the property, actually prison guards. They're expecting to hold Sarah and Thomas for another week while the legal proceedings against you unfold." She traced routes on the map with precise fingers. "The main approach is exposed, visible from the camp buildings. But there's a ravine on the eastern side, partially collapsed from old mining operations. It provides cover almost to the main structure. If we time it right, arrive before dawn, we might reach the building before they realize we're there." "And then?" "Then we improvise. My original plan was to free them and run, get them somewhere safe while I took the evidence to federal authorities. But with the marshal arriving at dawn, that timeline doesn't work anymore. We need to hit multiple targets simultaneously." Caleb studied the map, his tactical mind engaged despite the impossibility of it all. "What you're describing requires more than 2 people. We'd need—" The sound of horses cut through his words. Multiple riders moving fast despite the weather. Caleb doused the lamp instantly, moved to the window. 4 men, maybe 5, approaching from the direction of town. They weren't trying to be subtle. "They're early," Lin May whispered, joining him at the window. Her derringer appeared in her hand again. "Thornton must have had someone watching the station. When I didn't take the return stage, he sent them after you. After both of us now." The riders pulled up 50 yards from the cabin, spreading out in a loose perimeter. One of them wore a badge that caught moonlight, the territorial sheriff Caleb recognized from town. The others were hardened men, the kind hired for violence rather than law. "Caleb Hart!" The sheriff's voice carried across the snow. "We have a warrant for your arrest. Come out peacefully, and nobody gets hurt." Caleb's jaw tightened. Warrant wasn't supposed to arrive until morning. Thornton's improvising too. Lin Mei's eyes scanned the cabin's interior, calculating. The cellar. You have a cellar? Yes, with a tunnel to the barn. Built it for supply storage during hard winters. Can we reach it without being seen? Maybe. If they haven't surrounded the entire building yet. The sheriff called out again. We know the woman's in there with you, Hart. You're just making this worse. Send her out and we'll talk about terms. Lying bastard, Lin Mei muttered. They'll kill us both the moment we show ourselves. Make it look like you resisted arrest. I was caught in the crossfire. Caleb made a decision. He grabbed his rifle, a satchel of ammunition, the winter gear hanging by the door. The ledger. Anything else we need from that bag? Lin Mei was already moving, stuffing documents into her cloak, abandoning everything else. Ready. They moved through the cabin low and fast, Caleb leading toward the rear room where a concealed hatch opened into the cellar. Behind them, he heard the sheriff's patience running out, orders being given to the other men. The cellar was narrow and dark, smelling of earth and stored vegetables. Caleb had dug the tunnel himself, reinforced it with timber, created a passage that emerged in the barn's back corner. It had seemed like excessive precaution at the time. Now it was survival. They crawled through on hands and knees, Lin Mei moving with surprising speed despite her dress. Behind them, boots hit the cabin's front porch. The door crashed open, shouting, the sound of rooms being searched. The tunnel exit opened into the barn's grain storage. Caleb pushed through, helped Lin Mei up, then secured the panel behind them. His horses stirred in their stalls, sensing tension. We'll need to ride hard and quiet until we're out of range, Caleb said, already moving to saddle the two strongest mounts. Then we run. They'll follow, but in this weather, tracking at night is near impossible. Where do we run to? The mining camp. You said they're not expecting trouble for another week. We hit them before Thornton can send reinforcements. But Lin Mei caught a saddle he tossed her way, began fitting it with practiced efficiency. That's insane. We'll be outnumbered, exposed. You have a better plan? Several, actually. All of which involve not riding into an armed camp with a two-person assault force. Those better plans take time we don't have. Caleb secured his rifle to the saddle, added supplies with quick, efficient movements. Sarah and Thomas are leveraged now. The moment Thornton knows this arrest failed, he'll move them, or worse. We go now, or we lose any chance of saving them. He turned to face her directly. You came here to stop him, to save them. This is how we do it. Lin Mei stared at him, something shifting in her expression. Then she nodded once, sharp and final, and swung into the saddle with the grace of someone raised around horses. Outside the barn, more shouting. The sound of the cabin being torn apart, frustration building. They'd found the cellar entrance by now, would realize the escape route in moments. Caleb opened the barn's rear doors, the ones facing away from the cabin toward open valley and darkness. Snow drove in immediately, temperature brutal. He mounted, gathered the reins, looked at Lin Mei. Stay close. Don't stop for anything. If we get separated, the mining camp is 12 miles due north. Look for the collapsed ravine approach. I know. Her voice was steady despite everything. I drew the map. Then they were riding, bursting from the barn into the full fury of the storm. Behind them, shouts of discovery, men scrambling for their own horses. But Caleb knew this valley in ways no outsider could match. Every draw and ridge, every place where a horse could run and where pursuit would falter. He led Lin Mei into the darkness, into the storm, toward a confrontation that would either save two innocent people or destroy them all. The letters in his satchel pressed against his side, evidence of a connection built on deception that had somehow become the most honest thing in his life. Whatever happened next, there was no going back to the solitary existence he'd known. The woman who wasn't his bride rode beside him through the Wyoming winter, and together they carried the only chance of survival for people who'd become pawns in a larger game. The wind erased their tracks almost as quickly as they made them. Behind, the pursuers' voices faded into the storm. And ahead, somewhere in the frozen darkness, two captives waited for rescue that might never come. Unless two people who barely knew each other could accomplish the impossible. The horses ran on, muscles surging beneath them, breath steaming in the frigid air. Lin Mei rode with fierce concentration, her smaller frame balanced perfectly against the motion. Caleb caught glimpses of her through the driving snow, determination carved into every line of her posture. They had maybe 6 hours until dawn. 6 hours to cross 12 miles of brutal terrain, locate a fortified position, and free 2 prisoners from armed guards without getting everyone killed. 6 hours to prove that truth was stronger than lies, that courage could overcome conspiracy, that 2 people built from loneliness and deception might forge something genuine enough to matter. The valley opened before them, vast and merciless and beautiful. And somewhere in that frozen wilderness, salvation or destruction waited with equal patience. They rode toward it together, no longer strangers, not yet partners, but something forged in crisis that had no name yet. Only the cold certainty that turning back meant surrender. And neither of them had come this far to surrender. The storm swallowed them, and the night held its breath, and the first part of their impossible journey began. The cold became something alive, reaching through layers of wool and leather to find skin, to test resolve. Caleb felt his face going numb, ice forming in his beard where breath met air. Beside him, Lin Mei rode with her head down against the wind, one hand clutching the reins, the other pressed against her cloak where the ledger rested. They'd been riding for nearly an hour, putting distance between themselves and pursuit, but the storm that concealed them also slowed their progress. What should have been a fast crossing had become a grinding test of endurance, the horses laboring through drifts that reached their chests in places. Caleb raised a hand, signaling a brief halt in the shelter of a rock outcropping. The horses needed rest, and he needed to verify their direction before the landscape became completely unrecognizable. Lin Mei dismounted stiffly, her movements careful. How much farther? Maybe 8 miles, but terrain gets rougher from here. Caleb studied the sky, trying to read stars through breaking clouds. Storms moving east. We'll have clearer weather but colder temperature, and more visibility for anyone tracking us. That works both ways? He checked his horse's legs, found them sound despite the brutal pace. If they're still following, the cold will force them to find shelter. No one pushes through weather like this without strong motivation. Thornton's men have strong motivation. He pays well for loyalty. Lin Mei was examining her own mount, running experienced hands along the animal's flanks. How did you learn to ride like that? Most ranchers are competent. You move like cavalry. Wyoming volunteers. 5 years back when the territorial disputes were hot. Caleb didn't elaborate. That was old history, old violence he'd tried to leave behind when he built the ranch. You ride well yourself, not what I'd expect from a bookkeeper. My father ran a trading post on the border. I grew up moving between cultures, between worlds. Horses were transportation before they were recreation. She straightened, met his eyes across her horse's back. You're wondering if anything I've told you is true, if this whole thing is another layer of deception. The thought occurred. Good. You'd be a fool to trust me completely. Lin Mei pulled her cloak tighter. But you'd also be a fool to doubt the evidence. When we reach the mining camp, when you see Sarah and Thomas, you'll know I was telling the truth about them at least. And the rest? The rest you'll have to decide for yourself. They stood in the brief shelter of stone and wind, 2 people bound by circumstance and necessity, neither quite sure what to make of the other. Caleb found himself studying her face in the dim light, the sharp intelligence in her eyes, the tension in her jaw, the way she held herself with careful control even in the midst of chaos. Those letters, he said quietly. You wrote about finding dignity in small things, about building something that lasts through honest work. Was any of that real? Lin Mei was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice carried unexpected weight. I spent 5 years recording how Thornton destroyed people, watching families lose everything, seeing good people broken by schemes I helped facilitate. I told myself it wasn't my responsibility, that I was just keeping numbers, that survival meant compromise. She looked away toward the darkness and snow. But the truth is simpler than that. I was a coward. I saw evil and I served it because serving it was easier than fighting it. And now? Now I'm fighting it. Whether that's redemption or just another form of cowardice, running from what I've done by trying to stop what's coming, I don't know yet. She turned back to him. But those letters were real, Mr. Hart. The loneliness was real. The hope that somewhere there might be a place where honesty mattered more than advantage, where building something true was possible, that was real too. I just didn't believe I deserved to find it myself. The wind picked up, driving fresh snow against the rocks. Caleb felt something shift in his understanding of the woman before him. Whatever else she might be, she wasn't simple, wasn't easy to categorize or dismiss. "We should move," he said finally. "Temperature's still dropping." They mounted again, pushed back into the full force of the weather. The landscape gradually changed, open valley giving way to rougher country, stone thrusting through snow in sharp ridges. Caleb navigated by instinct and memory, following routes he'd scouted during his first years in the territory when he'd explored every corner of his land and beyond. "Tell me about Sarah," he said, pitching his voice to carry over the wind, "not the woman in the photograph, the real one." Lin May rode in silence for several heartbeats. "She's 19. Practical, resilient, smarter than her circumstances allowed her to show. Her mother died when she was 12, so she's been managing her father's household since then. She reads everything she can find, teaches school when harvest season allows. She wanted to go to college, study literature, or maybe law, but her father's debts made that impossible. And Thomas? 14, quick-minded, good with numbers and mechanics. He'd been saving money from odd jobs, planning to buy books on engineering. He didn't want to be a farmer like his father." Her voice tightened. "When Thornton took them, Thomas fought back. One of the guards hit him hard enough to leave a scar." Caleb's hands tightened on the reins. "How do you know these details?" "Because I processed the paperwork. Because I saw the reports Thornton's men filed. Because part of my job was documenting everything, creating a paper trail that made his schemes look legitimate." The bitterness in her voice was sharp as the wind. "I know exactly how much force they used restraining a 14-year-old boy. I recorded it in neat columns with precise notation." They rode on through darkness that was gradually, imperceptibly beginning to ease toward dawn. The storm's fury had lessened, replaced by bitter cold that turned breath to ice and made exposed skin burn. But the breaking weather revealed landscape more clearly, showed them where they were heading. The old mining territory rose ahead, scarred hillsides and collapsed shafts marking where men had once torn silver from stone. Most of the claims had played out years ago, leaving behind skeletal structures and dangerous ruins. Perfect place to hide prisoners where no one would hear them scream. Caleb pulled up at the edge of a ridge, studying the terrain ahead. "The ravine you mentioned, where exactly?" Lin May moved alongside, pointed. "There. See where the hillside collapsed? That's the old number 3 shaft. Cave-in took half the ridge with it. The ravine runs along the base, covered by overhang in places. It'll get us within maybe 200 yards of the main camp buildings." Caleb traced the route with his eyes, calculating approach angles and exposure points. "Guards will be watching the main access." "How many did you say?" 4, plus whoever's inside with the prisoners. Could be more. Thornton rotates men through his various operations." "Weapons?" "Rifles at least, probably sidearms. These aren't casual hired hands, Mr. Hart. They're men who've done this kind of work before." Caleb nodded slowly, his tactical mind assembling a plan from limited resources and desperate odds. "We'll leave the horses in the ravine, approach on foot. I'll create a distraction on the north side, draw their attention. You use that window to reach the building, free Sarah and Thomas. And then? Then you run. Get them away from here, head south toward the territorial road. There's a way station 15 miles out. Telegraph there. Get a message to federal marshals. Tell them everything." Lin May stared at him. "That's not a plan. That's suicide. It's the best option we have. The best option is we work together, create coordinated diversions, cover each other's movements, extract the prisoners as a team rather than sacrificing yourself so I can play hero. I'm not playing hero. I'm using available resources efficiently. I am not a resource to be used." Her voice cut sharp through the cold. "And you are not a sacrifice to make this easier. We do this together or not at all." Caleb turned to face her fully. "You think I want to die out here? I'm trying to give those kids the best chance at survival. By dying stupidly, by treating this like some glorious last stand?" Lin May's eyes blazed. "I didn't bring you evidence and risk everything to watch you throw your life away on a martyr's gesture. Sarah and Thomas need rescuing, yes. But they also need witnesses who can testify against Thornton, people who understand his operation well enough to dismantle it completely. That means both of us surviving this. Then what do you suggest? She was quiet for a moment, her mind visibly working through possibilities. The guards. They're expecting routine patrol duty, not assault. Their attention will be split between watching for external threats and managing prisoners. If we can exploit that division, how? I worked for Thornton for 5 years. The men on this detail probably recognize me, might even know I've gone missing. What if I approach openly, claim I escaped from you, that you're the dangerous one, that I need protection? Caleb shook his head immediately. Too risky. If they've been told to watch for you, they won't have been told yet. Communication out here is sporadic at best. Thornton would have sent men after us to the ranch, but he wouldn't have had time to get word to this camp about my betrayal. As far as these guards know, I'm still his trusted bookkeeper. It made a certain terrible sense, but the thought of sending her into that situation alone made something in Caleb's chest tighten with objection. And when you're inside, how do you free the prisoners without the guards noticing? I don't. Not immediately. Lin May's expression showed the cold calculation that must have made her valuable to Thornton. I verify Sarah and Thomas are there, assess exact numbers and positions, create an opening. Then you come in fast and hard when I give the signal. What signal? I'll think of something. She met his skepticism with steady resolve. This is what I know how to do, Mr. Hart. I've spent years navigating dangerous men in dangerous situations with nothing but words and careful observation. Trust me to do this part, then trust yourself to do what you do best when the moment comes. The sky was definitely lighter now, false dawn painting the eastern horizon with subtle gradations of gray. They were running out of darkness, out of time, out of options that didn't involve desperate gambles. Caleb studied the woman before him, small, fierce, carrying evidence that could destroy empires in the folds of her cloak. She'd come to him with truth when she could have simply run, had ridden through brutal weather toward danger instead of safety. Whatever else she might be, she wasn't a coward, not anymore. All right, he said finally. We do it your way, but the moment anything feels wrong, I know, get out, get clear, let you handle it. She managed something that might have been a smile. I'm not interested in dying either, Mr. Hart. I've got too much unfinished business. They moved the horses into the ravine's shelter, secured them where they'd be protected from wind and hidden from casual observation. Caleb checked his rifle, his ammunition, the knife at his belt. Lin May verified the ledger was secure, then withdrew her small derringer, checked its load with practiced hands. You know how to use that? Caleb asked. Well enough, though I've never actually shot anyone. Hope you won't have to today. Hope is a dangerous thing out here. She tucked the weapon away. But I suppose we're beyond safe choices now. They climbed the ravine's edge carefully, using the collapsed terrain as cover, moving with the deliberate patience of people who understood that haste led to mistakes. The mining camp resolved gradually from landscape into distinct structures. 3 buildings still standing, 1 partially collapsed, scattered equipment rusting in the snow. Smoke rose from the largest building's chimney. Signs of occupation, of warmth and life in the midst of desolation. Lin May pointed out positions with minimal gestures. 2 guards visible outside, 1 near the main door, another making slow patrol around the perimeter. Both armed with rifles, both looking cold and bored and thoroughly unprepared for actual trouble. The other 2 will be inside, Lin May whispered. Probably near the prisoners. Standard rotation would put 1 at the door, 1 on patrol, 2 on rest. They'll change every 4 hours. Caleb nodded, filing the information away. You sure about this? No, but uncertainty is better than certain failure. She met his eyes one more time. When I come out that door with Sarah and Thomas, be ready. I'll be ready. She started to move, then paused. Mr. Hart, Caleb, if this goes wrong, it won't. If it does, the ledger. Get it to federal authorities. Make sure Thornton answers for everything he's done. That's not going to be necessary. Promise me anyway. Caleb looked at her. This woman who'd deceived him, warned him, ridden beside him through hell, and was now preparing to walk into danger armed with nothing but nerve and deception. I promise. Lin May nodded once, then straightened, transformed her posture from fugitive to composed professional. The change was remarkable. She seemed to grow taller, her expression shifting from hunted to confident, every line of her body projecting competence and authority. Then she walked out of cover, directly toward the mining camp, as bold as sunrise. Caleb's heart hammered against his ribs as he watched her approach. The patrol guard noticed her first, rifle coming up in alarm. But Lin Mei called out something Caleb couldn't hear, her voice carrying authority and urgency. The guard lowered his weapon, confusion evident in his posture. The door guard emerged, drawn by the commotion. Lin Mei gestured back toward the ravine, her body language suggesting pursuit and danger. Both guards' attention turned outward, scanning the landscape for threats. She was magnificent, terrifying and magnificent. Lin Mei spoke rapidly, her hands moving in emphasis. One guard went back inside, probably to alert the others. The remaining guard kept his rifle ready, but seemed convinced by whatever story she was telling. After a moment, he nodded toward the building, gestured for her to enter. She disappeared inside, and Caleb felt his world narrow to the doorway and the weight of his rifle and the knowledge that everything now depended on timing and luck, and the desperate courage of a woman who'd spent years surviving by her wits. Minutes passed like hours. Caleb shifted position slightly, trying to see through windows, catching only shadows and movement. 3 guards outside now, spreading out, searching for the threat Lin Mei had described. The story was working. They believed her, but inside that building she was alone with at least 1 armed man and 2 terrified prisoners. If the deception unraveled, if someone questioned her too closely, if Thornton had gotten word to the camp after all, the door burst open. Lin Mei emerged with a young woman and a boy, moving fast but not quite running. Behind them, shouting, a guard appearing in the doorway with his rifle rising. Caleb was already moving, his body acting before thought completed. He broke from cover in a controlled sprint, the rifle coming to his shoulder with the muscle memory of 100 drills, 100 battles he'd tried to forget. "Down!" he shouted. Lin Mei dropped immediately, pulling Sarah and Thomas with her. The guard in the doorway tracked toward Caleb's voice, but he was backlit by interior light, blind to the approaching threat. Caleb fired. The shot took the guard in the shoulder, spinning him back into the building. Not a killing shot, he'd aimed low deliberately, but enough to neutralize the immediate threat. The other guards reacted, but they were spread out, disorganized, uncertain where the attack was coming from. Caleb used their confusion, firing twice more to keep them pinned, giving Lin Mei time to get the prisoners to cover. Then he was at their position, the 4 of them pressed against the building's wall while bullets chewed wood and stone around them. "Are you hurt?" Caleb demanded, his eyes sweeping across Lin Mei, the young woman who had to be Sarah, the boy with fierce eyes and a healing bruise across his face. "We're fine," Lin Mei said, breathing hard. "But we need to move, now." Sarah stared at Caleb with a mixture of terror and hope. "You came for us. You actually came. Talk later, run now." Caleb laid down covering fire as they sprinted for the ravine, his shots precise and deliberate, buying seconds they desperately needed. They reached the collapsed terrain, scrambled down into cover as return fire kicked up snow and stone around them. Thomas stumbled and Lin Mei caught him, kept him moving with urgent hands and sharp commands. The horses were 50 yards ahead. Safety was the ravine's far end, where they could mount and run before the guards organized proper pursuit. Caleb kept firing, keeping enemies pinned, his mind counting remaining ammunition with automatic precision. Then Sarah screamed. A guard had flanked them, coming around the ravine's far side, cutting off their escape. He had his rifle aimed directly at Thomas, his finger tightening on the trigger. Lin Mei didn't hesitate. She stepped in front of the boy, her derringer appearing in her hand, and fired twice. The range was nearly impossible for such a small weapon, but the first shot struck the guard's rifle, knocking his aim wild. The second caught him in the leg, dropping him, but his finger had already pulled the trigger. The bullet took Lin Mei in the side, spinning her around, dropping her to the snow. Sarah caught her, screaming Lin Mei's name, while Thomas stood frozen in shock. Caleb closed the distance in seconds, his rifle finding the downed guard, making sure he stayed down. Then he was kneeling beside Lin Mei, his hands already moving to assess the wound. "How bad?" she gasped, her face white with pain. "Bad enough." The bullet had entered below her ribs, exited through her back. Blood soaked her cloak, steaming in the cold air. "But you'll live if we move fast." "The horses." "I know." Caleb got his arms under her, lifted with careful strength. "Sarah, Thomas, mount up. Now!" They obeyed with the mechanical compliance of people in shock. Caleb secured Lin May in front of him on his horse, felt her weight sag against him as consciousness wavered. "Stay with me," he commanded, his arm tight around her waist, pressing cloth against the wound to slow bleeding. "You don't get to die after that performance. That was too good to waste." Her laugh came out as a cough. "Noted." They rode hard, leaving the mining camp behind, leaving guards scrambling for horses, leaving chaos in their wake. The sun was rising now, painting snow with rose and gold, revealing landscape in pitiless detail. Sarah rode with fierce concentration, Thomas clinging behind her. Both of them kept glancing back at Lin May, at the blood that marked their trail despite Caleb's attempts to staunch it. "Is she going to be okay?" Thomas called out, his voice cracking. "She's going to be fine," Caleb said with more confidence than he felt. "She's too stubborn to die." "Damn right," Lin May whispered against his chest. "Still have unfinished business." They rode toward the territorial road, toward the way station and telegraph and the possibility of help. Behind them, pursuit would be organizing, Thornton's men rallying, the full weight of corruption and violence preparing to crush them. But they had Sarah and Thomas. They had evidence. They had a story that could break Thornton's empire if they could just survive long enough to tell it. Caleb held Lin May against him, feeling her breath, her heartbeat, the stubborn life that refused to surrender despite blood loss and cold and impossible odds. The woman who'd written him letters about hope and honesty, who'd betrayed her employer to save strangers, who'd stepped in front of a bullet meant for a 14-year-old boy she barely knew. The woman who wasn't his bride but was becoming something far more complicated. "Hold on," he told her quietly. "Just hold on a little longer." Her hand found his where it pressed against her wound, her fingers cold but strong. "Not planning on letting go." The horses ran on through morning light, carrying 4 people bound by violence and revelation toward an uncertain future. And somewhere ahead, salvation or destruction waited with equal patience. But for now, they were alive. They were together. And they weren't finished fighting. The way station appeared through morning haze like a mirage, its weathered timber and smoking chimney promising warmth and safety that felt impossible after the night they'd endured. Caleb's arms ached from holding Lin May upright for the past hour, from maintaining pressure on her wound while guiding his horse with his knees alone. She'd stopped talking 20 minutes ago, her breathing shallow and rapid against his chest. "Almost there," he murmured, though he wasn't sure she could hear him anymore. "Just hold on." Sarah pulled alongside, her face drawn with exhaustion and fear. "Is she—" "She's breathing. That's enough for now." Caleb urged his horse faster despite the animal's obvious fatigue. "When we get there, I'll need you to help me get her inside. Thomas, you find the station master. Tell him we need the doctor from town. Fast as he can ride." The boy nodded, his jaw set with determination that looked too old for 14 years. The bruise on his face had darkened overnight, a visible reminder of what Thornton's men were capable of. They reached the station in a clatter of hooves and desperate urgency. The station master emerged, alarm crossing his weathered face at the sight of blood-soaked riders arriving at dawn. But he was frontier practical, asking no questions as he helped Caleb carry Lin May inside, directed Sarah to the stove where water was already heating, sent Thomas running for the nearest doctor. Caleb laid Lin May on a rough-hewn table near the fire, his hands gentle despite their trembling. Her eyes fluttered open, unfocused and dark with pain. "Did we make it?" Her voice was barely audible. "We made it. You made it." Caleb began carefully removing her blood-soaked cloak, revealing the full extent of the damage beneath. The wound was worse than he'd hoped, better than he'd feared. Clean entry and exit, but she'd lost significant blood during the ride. Sarah appeared with hot water and clean cloth, her movements efficient despite obvious shock. "I worked with the doctor back home sometimes, helped with births and injuries when he needed extra hands." "Then help me now." Caleb stripped away layers of fabric, exposing Lin May's side. The bleeding had slowed but not stopped. "We need to clean this, pack it tight, keep her warm until proper help arrives." They worked together in tense silence, Sarah's hand steady as she helped wash and bandage, while the station master hovered nearby with whiskey and strips of clean linen. Lin May drifted in and out of consciousness, occasionally gasping when their ministrations hit particularly painful points. "I'm sorry." Sarah whispered at one point, her voice thick with tears. "This is my fault. If Thornton hadn't used me, this is Thornton's fault," Caleb said flatly. "No one else's. You didn't ask to be used as leverage." "But she took a bullet meant for Thomas. For us. And we don't even really know her." Caleb finished tying off the bandage, his hands stained red despite washing. "She knew you well enough to risk everything. That's what matters." Lin May's eyes opened again, finding Sarah's face. "Not your fault," she managed, each word clearly costing effort. "Never your fault. Thornton chose this. We're just choosing differently." Sarah took Lin May's hand carefully, mindful of her injuries. "Thank you for coming for us, for everything you did. Thank Caleb. He's the one who rode into gunfire." Lin May's gaze shifted to him, something complicated moving in her expression. "Didn't have to. Could have turned me over to the sheriff. Saved yourself." "Could have," Caleb agreed, checking her pulse at her wrist, rapid but steady. "Didn't want to." "Why?" It was a simple question that demanded a complex answer. Caleb found himself thinking about letters written in careful script, about honesty discovered in the midst of deception, about a woman small enough to fit in his arms who'd faced down armed men with nothing but a derringer and absolute conviction. "Because those letters were real," he said quietly. "The person who wrote them was real, and I don't abandon real things just because they arrive differently than expected." The station master cleared his throat awkwardly. "Don't mean to interrupt, but there's the matter of the telegraph. Young Thomas said something about federal marshals?" Caleb straightened, his tactical mind reasserting itself despite exhaustion. "Right. We need to send messages, multiple messages to multiple offices. Can't trust that Thornton hasn't compromised local channels." "I can do that," Sarah offered, "if you tell me what to say." "The ledger." Lin May tried to sit up, gasped at the pain. "In my cloak. Sarah needs the account numbers, the property records, proof Thornton can't deny." Sarah retrieved the blood-stained ledger, opened it carefully. Her eyes widened as she scanned the pages. "This is comprehensive, detailed. Everything from dates to amounts to names of people he bribed. 5 years of documentation." Lin May's voice strengthened slightly, purpose giving her focus despite pain. "I wasn't always sure what I'd use it for, but I knew someday it would matter." Caleb watched Sarah absorb the information, saw understanding dawn in her expression. This quiet young woman had spent months believing she was entering into a simple business arrangement, a marriage of convenience to help her father escape debt. Instead, she'd been made a pawn in schemes that stretched far beyond one family's struggles. "Mr. Hart," Sarah said slowly, still reading, "the letter you received, the one about me, it says here Thornton paid for my photograph, for the correspondence fees, for travel arrangements. He made it look like you were funding everything." "Creating evidence of trafficking," Lin May confirmed. "When you arrived and claimed coercion, the paper trail would support criminal charges. Your testimony plus documentation would be enough for arrest and property seizure." Sarah's hands tightened on the ledger. "And my father? What was supposed to happen to him?" Lin May was quiet for a moment before answering. "Thornton planned to forgive the debt publicly, make himself look generous while privately ensuring your father remained dependent on his goodwill. If anyone questioned the arrangement later, your father would be too compromised to speak against him." "But you stopped it!" Sarah's voice carried wonder alongside the horror. "You threw away everything to stop it." "I enabled it first. For years." Lin May closed her eyes. "Don't make me into something noble. I'm just trying to balance accounts that can never actually be balanced." The door burst open, admitting wind and snow and Thomas breathing hard from running. "Doctor's coming, but there's riders on the road behind him. 4, maybe 5 men. They're moving fast." Caleb was already at the window, rifle in hand. In the distance, dark shapes moved against white landscape, closing on the station with clear purpose. Too many to be coincidence, too organized to be casual travelers. "Thornton's men," he said flatly, "must have picked up our trail, followed us here." The station master paled. "This is neutral ground. They can't just... They can do whatever Thornton pays them to do." Caleb checked his ammunition, found it dangerously low after the firefight at the mining camp. How many other people are here? Just me and my wife. She's in the back room. Get her somewhere safe. Cellar, if you have one. Caleb began pulling furniture toward the windows, creating improvised barriers. Sarah, you know how to shoot? Yes, my father taught me. Good. There's a rifle over the mantel. Load it, cover the east window. He turned to Thomas. You stay with Lin May. If shooting starts, you get on the floor and stay there. Understand? The boy nodded, his face pale but determined. He positioned himself near Lin May, one hand resting protectively on her shoulder. Lin May struggled to sit up despite obvious pain. Caleb, you can't fight them all, not with limited ammunition, not while protecting 4 other people. You have a better idea? Give them what they want. Give them me. The words hit like physical force. Caleb turned to stare at her, comprehension and rejection arriving simultaneously. Absolutely not. I'm the one Thornton wants. The one with evidence, with knowledge of his entire operation. You and Sarah and Thomas are just collateral now. Hand me over. They might let the rest of you go. Or they kill you and then kill us anyway to eliminate witnesses. Caleb resumed building barricades, his movements sharp with anger. We're not bargaining with your life. It's my life to bargain with. Not anymore, it isn't. He met her eyes, held her gaze with absolute conviction. You wrote about building something that lasts through honest work, about finding dignity and standing firm. We don't throw that away the moment things get difficult. This is beyond difficult. This is impossible odds. I've survived impossible odds before. The riders were close enough now to distinguish details. 5 men, heavily armed, spreading out to surround the station. Professional in their approach, experienced in violence. The kind of men who wouldn't hesitate to burn the building down if resistance proved too costly. Sarah moved to the east window, the rifle held with competent familiarity. Her hands were steady despite fear. They're positioning for assault, multiple entry points. Let them position. Caleb loaded his rifle with careful precision. Every second they spend planning is another second for the doctor to arrive, for help to come. What help? Lin May demanded. We sent telegrams, but response takes time. The local sheriff is compromised. Federal marshals could be days away. We're alone out here. We've been alone since this started. Caleb checked his pistol, verified the knife at his belt. Hasn't stopped us yet. A voice called out from beyond the station, carrying authority and false reason. Caleb Hart, we know you're in there. We know you have the woman and the Mitchell girl and her brother. Send them out and you can walk away from this. Caleb moved to the door, cracked it open just wide enough to shout back. Can't do that. These people are under my protection. You're harboring fugitives and kidnapping victims. You're wanted for abduction and assault. We're here to enforce the law. The law doesn't involve burning down neutral stations and shooting unarmed people. No one needs to get hurt. Just send out the Chinese woman and we'll talk about terms for the others. Lin May made a sound somewhere between laugh and sob. Talk about terms. As if Thornton negotiates in good faith. Sarah kept her rifle trained on movement outside. They're getting closer, testing our defenses. Caleb pulled the door shut, secured it with available furniture. The station was sturdy but not fortified, built for shelter from weather rather than warfare. Windows provided good shooting positions but also made them vulnerable to return fire. They could hold for a while, but without reinforcements or supplies, attrition would eventually favor the attackers. Thomas, Caleb said quietly, you said the doctor was coming. How far behind these men? Maybe 10 minutes when I saw him, but he was moving slower, alone. So he'll arrive in the middle of this. Perfect. Caleb's mind worked through scenarios, calculating odds. Sarah, when the doctor gets close, we need to provide cover so he can reach the station safely. Can you handle that? Yes. Her voice didn't waver. Lin May, I need you conscious and thinking. If we have to move you quickly, can you manage it? I can manage anything that doesn't involve bleeding to death in the next 10 minutes. She'd pulled herself into sitting position against the wall, her derringer back in her hand despite Caleb's earlier confiscation. But Caleb, realistically, what's the plan here? Hold until ammunition runs out? Hope Thornton's men get bored and leave? Hold until the situation changes in our favor. And if it doesn't change? He looked at her directly, This woman who'd written him letters about hope, who'd ridden beside him through hell, who'd taken a bullet protecting a child she barely knew. Then we make our own change. Outside, the false negotiations ended. The leader's voice turned cold and final. Last chance, Hart. Send them out or we come in. Caleb didn't bother answering. He positioned himself at the main window, rifle ready, his body angled to protect maximum interior space while maintaining firing position. Sarah took the east window, her rifle steady. Thomas crouched near Lin Mei, his young face set with grim determination. The station master had retreated with his wife to the cellar, leaving the fight to those already committed. And in the tense silence before violence, Lin Mei spoke quietly. Those letters I wrote, about dignity and honest work and building something that lasts. I meant every word. I just never believed I'd get the chance to live them. You're living them now, Caleb said without looking away from the window. By getting people killed? By standing up to someone who's destroyed lives for profit? By protecting people who can't protect themselves? By choosing truth over survival? He glanced back at her. Sounds like dignity to me. Sounds like suicide. Sometimes those look similar from the outside. The first shot shattered the western window, glass exploding inward in a spray of crystalline fragments. Caleb returned fire immediately, his bullet catching one of Thornton's men in the shoulder, spinning him back behind cover. Sarah fired from her position, forcing another attacker to dive for protection. Then it was chaos, violence erupting from multiple directions. Bullets punched through timber and glass, thudded into furniture, filled the station with smoke and noise and desperate motion. Caleb fired with controlled precision, making every shot count, his mind tracking ammunition and threat assessment with automatic calculation. Sarah proved herself competent, her shots deliberate and well-aimed, keeping the eastern approach suppressed. Thomas stayed low, protecting Lin Mei with his body when splinters and fragments flew too close. But they were outnumbered and outgunned, and Thornton's men knew it. The attackers coordinated their assault, maintaining pressure from multiple angles, forcing the defenders to split attention and ammunition. One man circled toward the back of the station, looking for weaknesses, while another provided covering fire. They're flanking, Sarah called out, swinging her rifle toward new movement. Caleb adjusted position, tried to cover both angles, felt the impossibility of the mathematics. They needed more shooters, more ammunition, more time. They had none of those things. A torch arced through the broken western window, landed in hay near the stove. Flames caught immediately, spreading with horrifying speed across dry material. Smoke billowed thick and choking. Fire, Thomas shouted, scrambling for water. But there wasn't enough water, wasn't enough time. The flames climbed the wall, found timber hungry for fuel, transformed the station from shelter to trap in seconds. We have to get out. Lin Mei struggled to stand despite her wound. We can't stay here. Caleb's mind raced through options that didn't exist. Outside meant exposure to concentrated fire. Inside meant burning alive. There were no good choices, only degrees of terrible. Then Thomas pointed toward the cellar. The station master said there's a root cellar. Could there be a secondary exit, somewhere that opens outside the main building? It was desperate hope, but hope nonetheless. Caleb pulled open the cellar door, shouted down. Is there another way out? The station master's voice came back terrified and clear. Storm doors, they open on the south side, but they're chained from outside. Can the chain be broken? Maybe, if you hit it hard enough. Hard. The smoke was thickening, flames consuming the western wall, heat building toward unbearable. They had seconds to decide, seconds to act. Caleb made the call. Everyone in the cellar, now! Sarah grabbed Thomas, pulled him toward the stairs. Caleb got his arms under Lin Mei, lifted despite her gasp protest. They descended into relative darkness and coolness, the station master and his wife pressing against the far wall in terror. Above, the fire roared with hungry joy, the building beginning its transformation from structure to pyre. The storm doors! Caleb lowered Lin Mei carefully, then moved to examine the angled wooden panels set into the ceiling at the cellar's far end. Heavy chains secured them from outside, visible through gaps in the weathered wood. I need something to use as leverage. The station master produced a crowbar, hands shaking. Will this work? It'll have to. Caleb wedged the tool against the chain, began applying pressure. The metal resisted, then began to give, links straining under force. Outside, Thornton's men had noticed the changed situation. Shouting, movement, the sound of boots approaching the south side. They'd realized the escape attempt, were moving to block it. "They're coming!" Sarah positioned herself at the base of the stairs, rifle ready to cover the cellar entrance if attackers breached from above. Caleb pulled harder, muscles screaming, the crowbar groaning. The chain held, then suddenly gave with a sharp crack. The storm doors burst open, admitting cold air and gray light and the immediate threat of men with guns. But something else came through that opening, the sharp report of a rifle, fired from unexpected angle. One of Thornton's men dropped, clutching his leg. Another dove for cover as more shots rang out. Caleb risked a glance through the opening, saw a sight that defied expectation. The doctor had arrived, but not alone. Half a dozen men rode with him, farmers and ranchers from the territorial road, armed and angry, drawn by Thomas's desperate message and whatever story the doctor had told them about injustice and violence. Reinforcements. Actual, genuine reinforcements. "Come on!" Caleb helped Lin May toward the opening, Sarah and Thomas following, the station master and his wife scrambling behind. They emerged into morning light and chaos, friendly fire providing cover, Thornton's men suddenly finding themselves outnumbered and exposed. The doctor, a spare man with iron-gray hair and steady hands, took one look at Lin May and gestured sharply. "Get her in my wagon, now!" Caleb carried her there while the territorial men kept Thornton's hired guns pinned down. The tide had turned completely, impossibly, survival snatched from the jaws of certain death. Sarah helped Thomas into the wagon while the doctor began examining Lin May's wound with professional efficiency. Bullet wound, significant blood loss, possible internal damage. "You've done decent field work keeping her alive this long." "Will she make it?" Caleb heard the strain in his own voice. "If we get her to proper facilities, yes. She's strong, stubborn." The doctor glanced up at Lin May's face. "You're going to be fine, young woman. Just stay still and let me work." Lin May managed a weak smile. Staying still, specialty of mine. Around them, Thornton's men were surrendering or fleeing, confronted with odds that no longer favored violence. The territorial marshal arrived moments later, drawn by the smoke and gunfire, finding a situation already resolved by civilian action. Caleb stood beside the wagon, watching the doctor work, feeling exhaustion and relief, and something more complicated crash over him in waves. They'd survived. Against impossible odds, through desperate chances, they'd actually survived. Sarah appeared at his elbow, her face smudged with smoke and tear tracks. "Mr. Hart, Caleb, I don't know how to thank you for... You already thanked me. By being brave, by standing firm when it mattered." He looked down at her. "You and Thomas both. You've got more courage than most adults I know. We learned it from watching you. And Lin May." She glanced at the woman in the wagon. "She's going to be okay?" "The doctor thinks so." "Good." Sarah's voice strengthened. "Because I have questions for her about those letters, about everything she knows about Thornton's operation. If we're going to destroy him completely, we need her testimony." Caleb felt something like pride watching this young woman transform from victim to warrior. "Then she'll have time to give it. We'll make sure of that." The territorial marshal approached, his expression grave. "Mr. Hart, I'm going to need statements from everyone involved. There are serious charges being leveled, and I need to understand what happened here." "I have evidence," Lin May called from the wagon, her voice carrying despite weakness. "Ledger documenting 5 years of criminal activity. Property fraud, bribery, assault, conspiracy. Names, dates, amounts. Everything you need to build a case against Marcus Thornton." The marshal's eyes widened. "You can prove these allegations?" "I can prove all of it. I kept the books. I know where the bodies are buried." She managed dark humor despite pain. "Metaphorically speaking?" "Mostly." Around them, the station continued burning, the structure collapsing in on itself with crashes of timber and showers of sparks. The fire that was meant to kill them instead became a beacon, drawing help, transforming certain death into improbable survival. Caleb watched it burn, thinking about letters and deception, about the woman he'd expected to meet and the woman who'd arrived instead, about plans destroyed and futures forged in fire. Lin May caught his eye from the wagon, her expression serious despite the doctor's ministrations. "Thank you," she said quietly. For not giving up. For not trading me away when it would have been easier. Wasn't about easy. It was about right. He moved closer, lowered his voice. Besides, you still owe me answers. About those letters. About what's real and what was performance. I'll tell you everything. When I'm not actively bleeding. I'll hold you to that. The doctor finished bandaging, began preparing to transport her to proper medical facilities. Sarah and Thomas climbed into the wagon beside her, the three of them bound now by shared trauma and survival. The marshal was already organizing pursuit of the fled attackers, sending telegrams to federal authorities, setting in motion the machinery of justice that would either destroy Thornton or be destroyed by his corruption. And Caleb stood in the snow and smoke and morning light, watching everything he'd thought he wanted burn away, replaced by something more complicated and more real than he'd imagined possible. The woman who wasn't his bride had survived. The children she'd protected were safe. The evidence that could bring down an empire was secure. They'd won, against all odds, against all reason. But the fight wasn't over. Thornton would respond to this defeat with everything he had. The corruption ran deep, the danger far from finished. Still, watching Lin May's fierce expression as she argued with the doctor about treatment priorities, watching Sarah comfort her brother with gentle hands, Caleb felt something like hope take root. They'd survived the impossible once. They could do it again. The doctor's office in town smelled of carbolic acid and old leather, a small space crammed with medical texts and bottles of mysterious tinctures. Lin May had been moved here 3 days ago. The wound cleaned and stitched properly, fever managed through careful nursing and the doctor's grim determination. She drifted in and out of consciousness those first 48 hours, her body fighting infection while Caleb kept vigil from a chair beside her bed. Sarah and Thomas had been installed with a minister's family 2 streets over, safe and cared for while the territorial marshal coordinated with federal authorities. The ledger was in a safe in the marshal's office, copied 3 times and sent to different jurisdictions in case Thornton tried to destroy evidence. But Thornton himself remained free, conducting business in Cheyenne as though nothing had happened, protected by layers of legal maneuvering and corrupt officials who owed him their positions. The men captured at the way station had refused to testify against him, claiming they'd been hired for legitimate security work and knew nothing about kidnapping or conspiracy. It was the 3rd morning when Lin May finally woke with clear eyes and steady breathing, the fever broken, the immediate danger past. Caleb had dozed off in the chair, his body finally surrendering to exhaustion after days of vigilance. He woke to find her watching him, something complicated in her expression. "You're still here," she said, her voice rough from disuse. "Where else would I be?" Caleb straightened, his back protesting the awkward sleeping position. "How do you feel?" "Like I was shot and then rode 12 miles bleeding, but alive." She shifted carefully, testing her limits. "Sarah and Thomas?" "Safe. The minister's family is looking after them. Thomas has been asking about you every few hours. Sarah's been helping the marshal make sense of your ledger entries." Lin May's eyes widened slightly. "The ledger survived?" "Everything survived. The evidence, the witnesses, even you despite your best efforts to bleed out." Caleb poured water from a pitcher, helped her drink. "The marshal's been building a case. Federal prosecutors are involved now. They're taking it seriously. But Thornton's still free. For now." Caleb set the cup aside. "They're being careful, building something airtight before they move. The corruption goes deeper than anyone realized." Lin May was quiet for a moment, her gaze distant. "I could have told them that. 5 years watching him by judges and sheriffs and territorial officials. He doesn't just break laws, he rewrites them through people who owe him everything. Which is why your testimony matters so much. You're not just an outside observer, you are inside the operation." "I was complicit in the operation." Her voice hardened with self-judgment. "Don't dress it up as something noble. I helped destroy families because it was easier than fighting back." Caleb pulled the chair closer to the bed, met her eyes directly. "And then you stopped. You gathered evidence, you warned me. You rode into danger to save 2 people you'd never met. That counts for something." "Does it? Does choosing to be decent after years of enabling evil actually balance anything? I don't know. But I know you stepped in front of a bullet meant for a 14-year-old boy. That's not the action of someone irredeemable." Lin May looked away, her jaw tight. Thomas reminds me of my younger brother. He had the same fierce eyes, the same stubborn determination. He died when I was 16, fever, during a hard winter. I couldn't save him. Her voice dropped. Maybe that's all this is, trying to save someone else's brother because I couldn't save my own. Or maybe it's just doing the right thing because you recognize it as right. Caleb reached out, his hand hovering near hers before settling on the bed cover beside her. Motivation doesn't make the action less meaningful. Before Lin May could respond, the door opened and the doctor entered, carrying fresh bandages and a concerned expression. You're awake. Good. Let's see how the wound is healing. Caleb moved to give him space, but the doctor waved him back. You've been nursing her this long, might as well see the results of your work. The examination revealed healing that satisfied the doctor, if not Lin May's impatience. The wound was clean, stitches holding, no signs of renewed infection. With proper rest and care, she'd make full recovery. How long until I can travel? Lin May asked. Travel? You're not traveling anywhere for at least 2 weeks, probably longer. I don't have 2 weeks. Thornton knows I'm here, knows I'm vulnerable. Every day I stay in one place is another opportunity for him to what? The doctor's voice carried steel beneath the professional courtesy. Attack a patient under medical care in the middle of town? With federal marshals investigating him? He may be powerful, but he's not stupid. Drawing more attention to himself right now would be suicidal. You don't know him like I do. Perhaps not. But I know gunshot wounds, and I know infection. You push too hard too fast, you'll tear those stitches, and we'll be starting over, possibly in a coffin. The doctor began applying fresh bandages. So, you'll stay put, you'll rest, and you'll let your body heal. That's not negotiable. After the doctor left, Lin May stared at the ceiling with visible frustration. 2 weeks. Thornton could accomplish a lot in 2 weeks. So can federal prosecutors. Caleb settled back into the chair. The marshal said they're interviewing everyone in that ledger, building a web of evidence that connects Thornton to every scheme you documented. Interviews can be intimidated. Evidence can be destroyed. Money can make problems disappear. Not this time. Too many people involved now. Too much attention. He paused, considering his next words carefully. Sarah wants to testify, publicly. She says she's tired of being a victim in someone else's story. Lin May's head turned sharply. Then she winced at the movement. That's dangerous. If she takes a public stand, she becomes a symbol. Someone Thornton can't quietly eliminate without proving everything she says about him. Caleb had spent hours discussing this with Sarah, understanding her reasoning even as he worried about the risk. She's thought it through. She knows what it means. She's 19 years old. She shouldn't have to be that brave. No, but she is anyway. Caleb met Lin May's eyes. Kind of like someone else I know, someone who wrote letters about finding dignity and standing firm, then actually lived those words when it mattered most. Color touched Lin May's cheeks, though whether from fever or emotion was unclear. Those letters. We should talk about those letters. We should, but you should also rest. I've been resting for 3 days. I want to talk. She shifted position carefully, her expression serious. You deserve the truth about what was real and what was performance. Caleb felt his pulse quicken despite himself. All right. Tell me. Lin May gathered her thoughts, her gaze distant with memory. When Thornton first ordered me to write correspondence to a lonely rancher, I approached it like any other assignment. Research the target, understand the requirements, produce results. I studied examples of personal letters, analyzed what made them compelling. I built a profile of what someone like you would want to hear. Sarah Mitchell, the woman in the photograph. The photograph was real. Sarah exists, her situation was real, but Thornton used her as a framework, not a person. He didn't care about her thoughts or feelings, only about creating a convincing package. Lin May's hands twisted the bed cover. I was supposed to write generic pleasantries, safe topics, nothing too personal or revealing, but you didn't. No. I started writing and found myself saying things I'd never said to anyone. About loneliness that wasn't just about being alone, but about being unable to speak honestly. About watching the world through translation, always interpreting, never quite belonging anywhere fully. She paused, her voice dropping. About wondering if somewhere there existed a place where being honest wasn't weakness. where building something real mattered more than protecting yourself from disappointment. Caleb listened in silence, absorbing words that resonated with his own carefully hidden thoughts. I wrote about books because I love books, Lin May continued. About weather, because I spent years watching seasons change while recording other people's destruction. About small dignities, because those were what I'd sacrificed for security and comfort. She finally met his eyes. Every observation, every thought, every hope expressed in those letters was mine. I just signed Sarah's name to them because I didn't believe someone like you would want to hear them from someone like me. Someone like you, Caleb repeated quietly. What does that mean? Chinese, foreign, complicit in terrible things. She said it matter-of-factly, without self-pity. I've spent my whole life being useful to people who didn't see me as fully human. Just a tool, a translator, a bookkeeper, a means to an end. The idea that someone might value my actual thoughts, my real self, seemed impossible. But you wrote them anyway. Put truth in those letters, even knowing I'd never know it came from you. Because it felt important to be honest about something, even if the honesty was hidden behind deception. Lin May's smile was bitter. I'm aware of the irony. Caleb stood, moved to the window where morning light painted the street in soft gold. He thought about the letters he'd cherished, about the woman he'd imagined meeting, about how reality had proven far more complicated and far more real than fantasy. I was angry when I first learned the truth, he said, watching people move about their daily business outside. Felt betrayed, used, but then I watched you risk everything to save people you barely knew. Watched you take a bullet protecting a child. And I realized the person who wrote those letters was exactly who I thought she was. Just not who I expected. Does that matter? That I'm not what you expected? He turned to face her. The woman I expected was an idea. Someone safe and predictable who'd fit into the life I'd planned without requiring me to change or grow or question anything. His voice softened. The woman who arrived challenged everything. Made me think about what's real versus what's comfortable. Made me choose between easy surrender and difficult resistance. And you chose resistance. We chose resistance, together. Caleb moved back to the chair, sat so they were eye level. So to answer your question, yes, it matters that you're not what I expected, because what I expected was smaller than what I actually needed. Lin May's eyes gleamed with something that might have been tears, though her voice stayed steady. You understand this changes everything. If I testify against Thornton, if I help destroy his empire, I'll be marked forever. No respectable community will accept me. The Chinese community will see me as a traitor for working with authorities. The white community will see me as a criminal who turned informant. I'll belong nowhere. You'll belong here, if you want to. The words hung in the air between them, weighted with implication and possibility. Here, Lin May repeated. With you, on a ranch in the middle of Wyoming territory, miles from anywhere, with a man I met under the worst possible circumstances. When you say it like that, it does sound ridiculous, Caleb acknowledged. But ridiculous is better than dead, and honest is better than safe. Before she could respond, rapid footsteps sounded in the hallway outside. The door burst open and the marshal entered, his face grave with urgency. We have a problem. Thornton's made his move. Caleb was on his feet immediately. What kind of move? Legal one. Smart one. The marshal's jaw was tight with frustration. He's filed charges against Miss Lin for embezzlement and fraud. Claims she stole from him, falsified records, then fled when discovered. He's got affidavits from 3 employees supporting his version. A judge in Cheyenne issued a warrant for her arrest. Lin May struggled to sit up despite the pain. Of course he did. Attack my credibility before I can testify against him. Make me the criminal so anything I say looks like revenge. It's worse than that. The marshal's expression was grim. The judge who issued the warrant, he's also scheduled to hear the preliminary case against Thornton, same judge, and he's ruled that all evidence from questionable sources, meaning your ledger, is inadmissible until the embezzlement charges are resolved, which could take months, years if Thornton drags it out. Lin May's hands clenched, by which time witnesses will disappear, records will be destroyed, and the whole case falls apart. That's the strategy, yes. The marshal looked at Caleb. There's more. He's also filing civil suit claiming you conspired with Miss Lynn to defraud him, that you knew she was stealing and helped her escape. If that proceeds, your property could be seized pending resolution. Caleb felt cold certainty settle over him. He's going after everything at once. Destroy Lynn's credibility, tie me up in legal battles, eliminate the evidence, and walk away clean. And it might work. The marshal's voice carried bitter acknowledgement. The corruption runs deeper than we thought. The territorial system is compromised at multiple levels. Even federal prosecutors are hesitating because they don't trust local courts to support their case. So what do we do? Sarah's voice came from the doorway where she'd appeared with Thomas, both of them having clearly heard everything. There has to be something. The marshal was quiet for a long moment. There might be, but it's risky and it requires Miss Lynn to be strong enough to travel. I'm strong enough for whatever's necessary, Lynn May said immediately. The doctor who'd followed the marshal upstairs made a sound of protest. You are not strong enough for travel. Your wound. My wound will kill me slower than Thornton will. Lynn May swung her legs over the side of the bed, her face paling but her determination absolute. What's the plan? The marshal exchanged glances with the doctor, then sighed. There's a circuit judge, federal appointee, not territorial. He's in Denver right now, but he'll be in Fort Collins in 4 days. If we can get you there, if we can present evidence directly to him, he has authority to override territorial decisions and fast-track the case to federal court. 4 days, Caleb calculated distance and difficulty. That's a hard ride in good weather. In winter, with someone recovering from a gunshot wound, it's impossible, the doctor finished. She'd never survive it. I survived riding 12 miles with a bullet in my side, Lynn May countered. I can survive 4 days in a wagon. A wagon won't make it in time. Snow's too heavy in the high passes. The marshal shook his head. You'd need to go by train part of the way, then horses for the mountain sections. Fast travel, minimal rest stops. Then that's what we do. Lynn May tried to stand, gasped at the pain, accepted Caleb's steadying hand with visible frustration. When do we leave? We? The marshal's eyebrows rose. Miss Lynn, I can't authorize. I'm going. Caleb's voice carried flat certainty. She doesn't travel alone. Not with Thornton's men looking for her. Not in her condition. I should go too, Sarah said firmly. I'm a witness. My testimony supports everything in the ledger. Absolutely not. The marshal's tone brooked no argument. You and your brother stay here where you're safe. This is dangerous enough without putting more civilians at risk. Thomas stepped forward, his young face set with determination. Then at least let me help prepare. I'm good with horses, good with equipment. I can make sure everything's ready. The marshal studied the boy, saw something that satisfied him. All right, you help with preparations, but you stay here when they leave. Plans formed rapidly after that, the marshal coordinating details with the efficiency of someone accustomed to crisis. A train would take them part of the way, private car arranged through contacts who owed favors. From there, horses and guides through the mountain passes, pushing hard to make Fort Collins before the judge moved on to his next circuit. It was risky. Possibly suicidal given Lynn May's condition and Thornton's resources, but it was also the only clear path forward, the only way to bypass the corrupted territorial system and get evidence in front of someone with authority and integrity. Caleb spent the next day preparing, gathering supplies, arranging for trusted men to accompany them part of the way. The territorial community, having witnessed the fight at the way station and heard about Thornton's schemes, rallied with surprising solidarity. Men offered horses, women packed food and medical supplies. Even the station master whose building had burned contributed money for the journey. Lynn May watched the preparations from the doctor's window, her expression complex. They're helping because they see us as heroes, fighting corruption, standing up for justice. They don't know I spent 5 years enabling the man we're trying to destroy. They know you're trying to stop him now, Sarah said from beside her. The young woman had spent hours with Lynn May over the past days, their relationship evolving from victim and rescuer into something like friendship. That's what matters to them. Does it matter to you, knowing what I did, the families I helped destroy? Sarah was quiet for a moment, choosing words carefully. My father made choices that put us in Thornton's debt. He borrowed money he couldn't repay, took risks that didn't work out. Were those choices influenced by systems Thornton manipulated? Probably. But my father still made them. She turned to face Lin Mei directly. You made choices too. Bad ones. Then you made better ones. I don't think people are defined by their worst moments. I think they're defined by what they do after those moments. That's a generous interpretation. It's a true one, Sarah's voice strengthened. You could have run, could have taken your evidence and disappeared somewhere Thornton would never find you. Instead, you warned a stranger, saved my brother and me, took a bullet protecting Thomas. Those aren't the actions of someone irredeemable. Lin Mei blinked against tears she wouldn't let fall. Your brother, how is he handling everything? Better than I expected. He's been helping prepare for your journey, learning everything he can about horses and equipment. I think having something useful to do helps him process what happened. Sarah smiled slightly. He talks about you constantly. Says you're the bravest person he's ever met. I'm not brave. I'm just finally doing what I should have done years ago. That's literally the definition of courage. Doing what's right, even when it's terrifying and difficult. The day of departure arrived with brutal cold and clear skies. Lin Mei dressed with Sarah's help, her movements still careful around the healing wound. The doctor had packed supplies and detailed instructions, his expression grim with worry, but resigned to the necessity. Caleb waited outside with 2 horses and a small group of armed men who'd volunteered as escort to the train station. The territorial marshal stood with them, his hand resting on official papers that would hopefully provide some protection during the journey. The warrant for your arrest is territorial, not federal, he explained to Lin Mei as she emerged, which means technically it's only enforceable within Wyoming territory. Once you cross into Colorado, you're outside its jurisdiction. But Thornton has resources in multiple territories, so don't assume you're safe just because of arbitrary boundaries. Noted. Lin Mei accepted Caleb's help mounting, her face paling at the movement but her voice steady. Thank you. For believing me. For taking this risk. Thank you for bringing us evidence we can actually use. The marshal handed up her satchel, the ledger secure inside. Get this to Judge Morrison. Make him understand what's at stake. He's one of the few completely clean officials left in this region. Sarah and Thomas appeared, both wrapped against the cold. Thomas carried a carefully packed bag of supplies, his expression serious beyond his years. I put extra bandages in there, Spot, he said, handing the bag up to Caleb. And the medicine the doctor said was most important, and some of the food that's easiest to eat when you're hurt. Lin Mei looked down at the boy, something breaking in her expression. Thomas, thank you for everything. You saved my life. This is the least I can do. He hesitated, then added quietly, When you come back, will you teach me to speak Chinese? Sarah says you know lots of languages. When I come back, I'll teach you whatever you want to learn. Lin Mei's voice was thick with emotion she couldn't quite hide. Sarah stepped forward, her hand reaching up to clasp Lin Mei's. Come back safely, both of you. We'll be waiting. We'll come back, Caleb promised, one way or another. They rode out as the sun climbed higher, the small escort providing protection until they reached the train station 20 miles south. The journey was brutal on Lin Mei, despite her attempts to hide discomfort, each jarring movement visible in the tightness around her eyes, the way her breathing became shallow and controlled. Caleb kept pace beside her, his attention split between watching for threats and monitoring her condition. Twice he called brief halts, giving her time to rest despite her protests that they needed to keep moving. I can manage, she insisted during the second stop. I know you can, but you don't have to manage alone. Caleb offered water, helped her drink. We're partners in this. That means we look out for each other. Partners? Lin Mei repeated, something complicated in her tone. Is that what we are? I think that's what we've been since you stepped off that wagon on Christmas Eve. He met her eyes. Question is what we become after all this is over. If we survive. When we survive. Caleb's correction was firm. We've made it this far through impossible odds. We'll make it the rest of the way. The train station appeared ahead, smoke rising from the engine already building steam. Their escort would turn back here, leaving Caleb and Lin Mei to continue alone on the next leg of their desperate race against time and corruption. As they approached the platform, Caleb noticed a cluster of men watching the station with focused attention. They didn't wear uniforms but carried themselves like hired guns, their eyes scanning each arriving passenger with professional assessment. "Thornton's men," Lin May whispered, following his gaze. "He's watching the trains." "Can you ride?" Caleb asked quietly, his hand moving toward his rifle. "Do I have a choice?" "Not really." They dismounted quickly, moving toward the train with deliberate casualness, trying to blend with other travelers. The escort spread out, creating subtle barriers between them and the watchers. But one of Thornton's men had sharp eyes and sharper memory. Recognition flared across his face, his hand moving toward his weapon. "That's her! That's the Chinese woman!" Everything happened at once. The escort moved to intercept, drawing the attention of multiple watchers. Caleb grabbed Lin May's arm, pulling her toward the train even as gunfire erupted behind them. Passengers screamed, diving for cover. They reached the private car, Caleb practically lifting Lin May inside as bullets struck metal and wood around them. The train conductor, warned in advance by the marshal, slammed the door shut and signaled the engineer. The train lurched forward with agonizing slowness, building momentum while Thornton's men rushed the platform. More shots, the sound of the escort returning fire, chaos spreading through the station. Then they were moving, gaining speed, leaving the violence behind as the train carried them toward mountains and danger and the desperate hope of justice. Caleb helped Lin May to a seat, his hands checking for new injuries. "Are you hit?" "No. You?" "Fine." He moved to the window, watching the station recede. Two of their escort were down, others engaged in ongoing firefight. The price of their escape, paid by men who'd volunteered knowing the cost. Lin May followed his gaze, her expression haunted. "This is my fault. All of it. Everyone who's been hurt, everyone who's risked themselves, everyone who chose to fight rather than surrender to corruption." Caleb turned from the window, faced her directly. "Don't take that choice away from them by claiming sole responsibility. They're not children. They understood the stakes." Did they? Do they really understand how deep this goes? How powerful Thornton is? They understand enough. He settled into the seat across from her. And they understand something else. That sometimes you have to fight even when winning seems impossible, because the alternative is living in a world where men like Thornton get everything they want. The train carried them south through Wyoming winter, through landscape vast and beautiful and merciless. They had 3 days to reach Fort Collins, 3 days to stay ahead of pursuit, 3 days to keep Lin May alive and conscious enough to testify, 3 days to prove that truth could still matter, that courage could still triumph, that two people who barely knew each other could forge something strong enough to withstand everything working to destroy them. Outside the window, mountains rose against blue sky, promising difficulty and danger and the possibility of freedom beyond. Inside the private car, Caleb and Lin May sat in silence, bound by shared purpose and growing understanding, racing toward a confrontation that would either vindicate everything they'd risked or destroy them completely. The train wheels hammered against rails, carrying them forward into uncertainty, but forward nonetheless. The train broke down 18 miles outside Fort Collins. "Not a catastrophic failure," the engineer explained with frustrating calm, "just a coupling issue that would take several hours to repair. They could wait for the repair crew from town, or they could arrange alternate transportation. Either way, they weren't making Fort Collins by nightfall as planned." Caleb stood on the frozen platform of a waypoint station that barely qualified as civilization, watching Lin May lean against the train car with barely concealed exhaustion. 3 days of hard travel had taken their toll despite his efforts to manage her pain and rest. Her face was drawn, her movements careful, and the fever he'd been monitoring had crept higher through the afternoon. "We can't wait for repairs," she said, reading his assessment before he spoke it. "Judge Morrison leaves Fort Collins tomorrow at noon. If we miss that window—" "I know." Caleb scanned the small station, looking for options that didn't exist. 2 horses in a stable that looked half-collapsed, a wagon with a broken axle, and a station master who watched them with wary curiosity. "Can you ride?" "Can I stay upright on a horse for 18 miles through mountain terrain in the dark while running a fever?" Lin May's smile was grim. "Probably not, but I'll do it anyway because the alternative is worse." The station master emerged, a weathered man with sharp eyes that missed nothing. "You're the ones folks been talking about, fighting that businessman from Cheyenne." Caleb's hand moved instinctively toward his rifle. Depends who's asking. Someone who lost his brother's ranch to that same businessman 2 years back. The man spat tobacco juice into the snow. Debt manipulation, legal theft, all dressed up in proper paperwork. Nothing I could prove, nothing anyone would listen to. But I know what he is. Then you know we're trying to stop him, Lin Mei said. Heard something like that. Also heard he's got men watching roads and stations, looking for a Chinese woman and whoever's helping her. The station master studied them both. Question is, you planning to sit here arguing about horses or you want actual help? 15 minutes later, they were mounted on the station master's 2 best horses, supplied with fresh provisions and detailed directions through passes that would save them hours over the main road. The man refused payment, waving away Caleb's money with rough insistence. Just make sure that bastard answers for what he's done. That'll be payment enough. They rode into gathering darkness, following trails that wound through pine forest and rocky ravines where snow lay thick and treacherous. Lin Mei held herself upright through sheer will, her hands tight on the reins, her breathing measured to manage pain that Caleb could see etched in every line of her posture. Talk to me, he said after an hour of silence. Keep yourself alert. What should I talk about? Anything. Those letters you wrote. Tell me something else that was real. Lin Mei was quiet for several heartbeats, her attention seemingly focused on the trail ahead. I wrote about building something that lasts through honest work, about finding dignity in small things. You asked if that was real. Was it? My father built a trading post on the California border, spent 20 years establishing trust with communities on both sides, learning languages, negotiating disputes. He believed in honest dealing, in giving fair value, in keeping his word even when it cost him profit. She paused, her voice distant with memory. When he died, his partners dismantled everything within a month, sold the inventory, dissolved the agreements, erased 20 years of careful relationship building for immediate gain. How old were you? 15. Old enough to understand what I was watching. The lesson I learned was that honesty only matters if everyone involved values it. Otherwise, it's just weakness waiting to be exploited. So you stopped being honest. I stopped being naive about it. Lin Mei shifted in the saddle, winced. I took Thornton's job because I needed security, stayed because I was good at what I did, and he paid well. Told myself that keeping books wasn't the same as committing crimes, that I wasn't responsible for how he used the information I organized. But you knew. I knew. And I documented everything because some small part of me refused to completely surrender to what I'd become. She looked at him across the darkness. Those letters were me arguing with myself, trying to articulate values I no longer lived by, trying to remember what my father believed before the world proved him wrong. The world didn't prove him wrong. It proved that building good things is harder than destroying them. That doesn't make the building worthless. Doesn't it? If everything gets torn down anyway? Caleb thought about his ranch, about 5 years of brutal work creating something solid and real, about how easily it had nearly been taken. The building matters because we choose to make it matter, because we decide that effort and integrity and honest work have value even when the world doesn't reward them. Your father knew that. That's why he kept building despite difficulty, and died with nothing to show for it. He died with a daughter who remembered his principles, who carried them forward even when she thought she'd abandoned them, who ultimately risked everything to stop someone who represented the opposite of everything he built. Caleb's voice softened. Seems like something to show for a life. Lin Mei didn't respond, but something in her posture shifted, some small easing of tension that suggested his words had struck deeper than argument could reach. They rode on through night that gradually transformed into pre-dawn gray. The mountains rose around them, vast and indifferent and beautiful. Caleb kept checking Lin Mei's condition, watching for signs that her strength was failing beyond recovery. She swayed occasionally in the saddle, caught herself with visible effort, kept moving through determination alone. Almost there, he said, as Fort Collins appeared below them, light scattered across the valley floor like fallen stars. Another hour, maybe less. Good, because I'm not sure I have much more than that. Lin Mei's voice was tight with pain and exhaustion. Where do we find the judge? Courthouse. Marshal sent word we were coming, asked him to wait. Caleb urged his horse faster down the final descent. Question is whether Thornton's men are already there. Of course they're already there. He knows this is our only option. She straightened despite obvious cost. So we go in ready for trouble. They reached Fort Collins as the town was waking, shopkeepers opening doors, early workers beginning their day. The courthouse stood solid and imposing at the town's center, its windows already lit with interior lamps. Several horses were tied outside, including two that made Caleb's instincts flare with warning. Too fine for local workers, too well-maintained for casual travelers. Company, he murmured, dismounting and helping Lin May down. She barely kept her feet, leaning against him with uncharacteristic openness about her weakness. Can you walk? I can do whatever's necessary. She straightened, her hand pressing against her side where blood had begun seeping through the bandage. Let's finish this. They entered the courthouse together, Caleb's hand ready near his rifle. Lin May carrying the satchel with evidence that could destroy empires or get them both killed. The interior was quiet, official, and austere, with the particular smell of law and documentation that transcended geographic boundaries. A clerk looked up from his desk, his eyes widening at their appearance. Can I help you? We're here to see Judge Morrison. We have evidence in a federal case. Judge Morrison is in chambers with... The clerk stopped, uncertainty crossing his face. There are already people waiting to speak with him. Perhaps if you come back... We can't come back. Lin May stepped forward, her voice carrying authority despite her obvious physical distress. Tell the judge that Lin May is here with documentation regarding Marcus Thornton's criminal operations. Tell him we have evidence of corruption in the territorial court system. Tell him that if he doesn't see us immediately, Thornton will ensure we never get another chance to testify. The clerk hesitated, then nodded and disappeared down a hallway. Caleb used the brief wait to check Lin May's wound, found the bandage soaked with fresh blood. You're bleeding through. I noticed. Her voice was flat with suppressed pain. It'll hold until this is done. And if it doesn't, then at least the evidence makes it into the right hands. She met his eyes with fierce determination. I didn't come this far to fail at the final step. The clerk returned, his expression carefully neutral. Judge Morrison will see you, but he asks that you're aware other parties are also present who have interest in this case. Thornton's lawyers, Caleb said. Representatives with legal standing, yes. They followed the clerk down the hallway, through doors that opened into a chamber where justice was supposedly conducted fairly and without corruption. Judge Morrison sat behind a heavy desk. A man in his 60s with iron-gray hair and eyes that had seen decades of human nature at its worst and best. Two men in expensive suits stood near the window, their postures projecting confidence and barely concealed hostility. Thornton's lawyers, probably some of the best money could buy. Miss Lynn. Judge Morrison's voice was measured, revealing nothing of his thoughts. Mr. Hart, you've traveled a long way to be here. My clerk says you have evidence regarding criminal activity. Extensive evidence, Your Honor. Lin May moved forward, set the satchel on the judge's desk with careful precision. 5 years of documentation detailing property fraud, bribery, extortion, and conspiracy. Names, dates, amounts, methods. Everything needed to prosecute Marcus Thornton and dismantle his criminal operations. One of the lawyers stepped forward smoothly. Your Honor, we object to this presentation. Miss Lynn is currently wanted on warrant for embezzlement and fraud. Any evidence she presents is automatically suspect given her criminal status and obvious motivation to fabricate accusations against her former employer. The warrant is territorial and based on false charges, Caleb countered. Thornton filed them specifically to undermine Miss Lynn's credibility before she could testify against him. That's a serious allegation, Mr. Hart. Judge Morrison opened the satchel, began examining the ledger with careful attention. Do you have proof these charges are false? The ledger itself is proof. It documents the exact pattern Thornton uses. Falsify evidence, manipulate legal proceedings, destroy credibility of anyone who threatens him. The second lawyer spoke, his voice smooth with practiced rhetoric. Your Honor, even if we accept that this ledger is authentic, it was obtained through theft. Miss Lynn admits to taking it from Mr. Thornton's private records without authorization. That makes it inadmissible evidence regardless of content. Judge Morrison looked up from the ledger, his expression grave. Is that true, Miss Lynn? Did you take this from Mr. Thornton's possession without permission? I took it because it documents crimes I helped commit. Lin May's voice was steady, despite pain that had her gripping the desk's edge for support. Yes, I was employed by Thornton. Yes, I kept these books. And yes, I took them when I realized he planned to use a 19-year-old woman and her 14-year-old brother as leverage in a scheme to steal land through false criminal charges. Alleged scheme, the first lawyer interjected, based solely on the testimony of someone with obvious bias and criminal motivation. Based on testimony supported by documented evidence, Lin May countered. Every entry in that ledger can be verified through public records. Property transfers, loan agreements, court filings. The pattern is clear and provable. Judge Morrison continued reading, his expression darkening with each page. The lawyers shifted uncomfortably, their confidence eroding as they realized the judge was actually examining the evidence rather than dismissing it outright. Your Honor, the second lawyer tried again, we must insist that you consider the source. This woman worked for Mr. Thornton for 5 years, had access to confidential business information, and is now using that access to fabricate. I'm not fabricating anything. Lin May's voice cut sharp. I'm exposing what I helped hide. There's a difference between fabrication and confession. A confession of your own crimes, the lawyer seized on the admission, which you're trying to mitigate by accusing others. A confession of crimes committed at Thornton's direction and for his benefit. Lin May pulled herself straighter despite visible cost. I kept those books because he ordered me to. I documented his schemes because that was my job. I'm guilty of complicity, yes, but the architect of these crimes is Marcus Thornton, and that ledger proves it. Judge Morrison closed the ledger, his gaze moving between Lin May and the lawyers with measured assessment. These are serious accusations on both sides. Miss Lynn admits to participating in criminal activity. Mr. Thornton's representatives claim she's fabricating evidence out of malice. Your Honor, Caleb started, but the judge raised a hand. However, Morrison continued, I've been reviewing territorial court decisions for months now, preparing a report on judicial integrity for federal oversight. I've noticed disturbing patterns. Property seizures that follow questionable legal proceedings, criminal charges that appear and disappear based on political convenience, witnesses who recant testimony or vanish before trial. His eyes hardened. The name Marcus Thornton appears with remarkable frequency in cases exhibiting these patterns. The lawyers exchanged glances, their confidence fracturing completely. So while I appreciate your concerns about Miss Lynn's credibility, the judge continued, I'm inclined to examine her evidence thoroughly rather than dismiss it based on convenient accusations. He looked at Lin May directly. But I need more than this ledger. I need witnesses who can corroborate specific incidents. I need victims willing to testify publicly. I need evidence that can withstand aggressive legal challenge. I can provide that, Lin May said. The Mitchell family, Sarah and Thomas and their father, they were the most recent targets. Sarah was to be used as leverage, forced into false testimony against Mr. Hart here while her brother was held hostage. Alleged leverage, the first lawyer interjected weakly, again based only on Miss Lynn's claims. Based on the fact that Sarah and Thomas Mitchell were held prisoner at an abandoned mining camp for a week, Caleb said flatly. Based on the fact that armed men fired on us when we rescued them. Based on the fact that those same men tried to kill us at a territorial way station before witnesses who can testify to exactly what happened. And where are these witnesses now? The second lawyer demanded. Where's this Mitchell family? Why aren't they here supporting these allegations? Because they're being protected by the territorial marshal while Thornton's men hunt for them, Lin May said. Because bringing them here would expose them to the same danger we faced getting here ourselves. Because unlike Thornton, we actually care about the people caught in this situation beyond their usefulness as tools. The words hung in the chamber, raw with accusation and exhausted truth. Lin May swayed slightly, her hand pressed harder against her bleeding side. Caleb moved to steady her, felt how close she was to collapse. Judge Morrison saw it too. His expression shifted from judicial assessment to human concern. Miss Lynn, you're injured. You need medical attention. I need to finish this testimony first. Her voice was weakening, but her determination remained absolute. Because if I don't, Thornton wins. He destroys more families, ruins more lives, and the system that enabled him continues unchecked. Your Honor, the first lawyer made one final attempt. This is clearly a woman in medical distress making accusations she can't prove against a respected businessman. We ask that you dismiss these proceedings and allow Mr. Thornton to address the embezzlement charges through proper channels. Morrison's jaw tightened. Proper channels that run through territorial courts your client may have corrupted? Channels designed to protect Mr. Thornton rather than pursue justice. He stood, his full authority manifesting in the gesture. No. I'm authorizing immediate federal investigation into Marcus Thornton's business practices. I'm issuing orders to preserve all documents and prevent destruction of evidence. And I'm granting Miss Lynn immunity from territorial prosecution in exchange for her full cooperation with federal authorities. Your Honor, you can't, the second lawyer started. I can, and I am. Morrison's voice carried steel that silenced further protest. This ledger contains sufficient evidence of systematic corruption to justify federal intervention. Whether Miss Lynn's testimony proves ultimately credible will be determined through proper investigation. But I will not allow territorial politics and convenient accusations to prevent that investigation from occurring. He looked at Caleb and Lynn May directly. Get her to a doctor, now. Then both of you will provide detailed statements to federal marshals. They'll coordinate with the territorial marshal to secure witness testimony from the Mitchell family and anyone else who can corroborate these allegations. Lynn May sagged with relief that was almost as devastating as the pain. Thank you, Your Honor. Thank you for listening. Thank me by surviving long enough to testify properly. Morrison gestured to his clerk. Escort them to Dr. Whitman. Tell him it's federal business and send me the bill. Caleb got his arm around Lynn May as her legs finally gave out, supporting her weight as they left the chamber. Behind them, the lawyers were already scrambling, preparing whatever response Thornton would demand when he learned his schemes had been exposed. But they'd done it. Against impossible odds, through desperate chances, they'd actually gotten evidence into the hands of someone who would act on it. The doctor's office was 3 blocks away. Lynn May barely remained conscious for the walk, her body finally surrendering to exhaustion and blood loss and pain that could no longer be suppressed through will alone. Caleb carried her the last block, feeling how small she was in his arms, how fragile despite the fierce strength that had brought them this far. Dr. Whitman was a brisk, efficient man who asked no questions about the circumstances, only focused on immediate medical needs. He examined the wound, tisked at how it had been stressed during travel, and began the careful work of cleaning and restitching with professional competence. Lynn May drifted in and out of consciousness during the procedure, occasionally gasping when something hurt more than usual, but mostly lying still with exhaustion that went beyond physical limits. She'll live, Dr. Whitman finally pronounced, but she needs weeks of rest. No travel, no stress, nothing that could reopen this wound. You understand? I understand, Caleb said, watching Lynn May's pale face as she slept. We'll stay here until she's recovered. Good, because if she tries to ride anywhere in her current condition, she'll bleed out before making 10 miles. The doctor washed his hands with thorough precision. You did decent field work keeping her alive this long, but she's pushed far beyond what anyone should survive. Her body needs time to heal. Caleb settled into a chair beside the bed, his own exhaustion finally catching up now that immediate crisis had passed. They'd reached Fort Collins. They'd delivered evidence to a judge who would act on it. They'd survived when survival seemed impossible. Now came the harder part. Waiting. Trusting the system they'd fought so hard to reach, hoping that justice would actually prevail. 3 days passed in careful quiet. Lynn May slept most of the first day, her body finally allowed to focus on healing without the desperate need to keep moving. When she woke, federal marshals were waiting with detailed questions that she answered with meticulous precision, walking them through 5 years of documentation. Caleb provided his own testimony, explaining how the scheme had targeted him, how Lynn May had warned him, how they'd rescued Sarah and Thomas. The marshals listened with careful attention, taking notes, verifying details against the ledger's contents. On the 4th day, news arrived that Marcus Thornton had been arrested in Cheyenne. Federal agents had moved simultaneously against him and 3 territorial judges, seizing documents and freezing assets before anyone could destroy evidence. The investigation was expanding, drawing in everyone whose name appeared in Lynn May's careful records. Sarah and Thomas arrived in Fort Collins on the 5th day, escorted by the territorial marshal and ready to provide testimony. Sarah rushed to Lin May's bedside, her eyes bright with tears and relief. "You did it," she said, taking Lin May's hand carefully. "You actually stopped him." "We stopped him," Lin May corrected. "All of us together. I just kept the books." Thomas stood at the foot of the bed, his expression serious. "The marshal said Thornton's going to prison for a long time, that everything he stole might be returned to the families he took it from. If the federal prosecutors do their job right, yes." Lin May managed a weak smile. "Though legal proceedings take time, justice is slow." "But it's happening," Sarah insisted. "That's what matters. It's actually happening." Over the following weeks, as Lin May slowly regained strength and the legal machinery ground forward, the full scope of Thornton's empire became clear. 17 properties seized through fraud, dozens of families destroyed, bribes paid to officials across 3 territories. The case became a sensation, newspaper reporters arriving to cover the trial, editorials demanding reform of territorial corruption. Lin May testified before a grand jury, spending days walking them through the ledger's contents, explaining methodologies and documenting evidence with the same precision she'd once used to help Thornton destroy lives. Her immunity held despite aggressive challenges from Thornton's defense team. Her testimony, corroborated by victims and supported by documentary evidence, proved unshakable. Thornton was convicted on 14 counts of fraud, bribery, and conspiracy. The territorial judges who'd aided him were removed from office. The system he'd corrupted began the slow process of reform. And through it all, Caleb stayed in Fort Collins, watching Lin May heal, helping Sarah and Thomas navigate the legal process, thinking about futures that no longer looked anything like he'd planned. It was late February when Lin May was finally cleared to travel. The doctor pronounced her healed enough for careful riding, though he warned against any strenuous activity for at least another month. She stood in his office, testing her mobility, feeling the pull of scar tissue, but no sharp pain. "Where will you go?" Sarah asked. She and Thomas were returning to their father, helping him rebuild now that Thornton's debts had been voided and property returned. "Back to California?" "I don't have anything in California anymore." Lin May looked at Caleb, question implicit in her gaze. "I'm not sure where I belong now." Caleb had been thinking about this for weeks, wrestling with questions that had no easy answers. The woman standing before him wasn't the bride he'd expected, wasn't simple or uncomplicated or anything like the life he'd carefully planned. She was better than all of that. "My ranch needs a bookkeeper," he said finally. "Someone good with numbers and documentation, someone who understands how to build systems that last." Lin May's expression shifted, hope and uncertainty mixing. "I'm not very good with cattle." "You're good with truth. With standing firm when it matters. With building something real from honest work." He stepped closer. "That's worth more than knowing cattle. People will talk. A Chinese woman living on a rancher's property. It won't be respectable. Then we make it respectable. We get married, build something together that belongs to both of us." Caleb watched her face carefully. "If that's something you'd want." "Is it something you'd want? Truly? Not just obligation or gratitude, but actual desire to share your life with someone who spent 5 years enabling a criminal? Someone who spent 5 years documenting crimes that would eventually bring him down," Caleb corrected. "Someone who risked everything to save people she didn't know. Someone who wrote me letters about hope and dignity that turned out to be more real than any truth I'd thought I wanted." Lin May was quiet for a long moment, her eyes searching his face. "Those letters. I meant every word, but I never imagined actually living them, actually finding a place where honesty mattered more than survival. So let's build that place. Together, partners." "Partners?" she repeated, the word carrying weight and promise. "Not mail-order bride and desperate rancher, but actual equals choosing each other." "Exactly that." She crossed the space between them, her hand finding his. "Then yes, I'll marry you, Caleb Hart. I'll help you build something that lasts. I'll keep your books and probably argue with your decisions and definitely complicate your life in ways you haven't imagined." Looking forward to all of it. He pulled her closer, careful of her healing wound, feeling rightness settle over them like first snow. "Especially the arguing part. You're magnificently stubborn when you believe you're right. I learned from the best." Her smile was genuine, transforming her face from carefully controlled to genuinely joyful. Your own stubbornness is legendary. Sarah and Thomas watched with matching grins, their own relief and happiness evident. They'd found safety and justice and the restoration of their family. Now they were witnessing the beginning of something new, something forged from crisis and choice rather than convenience and transaction. The journey back to Wyoming took a week of careful travel, stopping frequently to rest, taking routes that favored comfort over speed. Sarah and Thomas accompanied them partway before branching toward their father's farm, their parting filled with promises to visit and stay connected. "You saved our lives," Sarah said when they reached the split in the road. "Both of you. I won't forget that." "You saved your own lives by being brave when it mattered," Lin May countered. "We just helped when we could." Thomas stepped forward, his young face serious. "When I'm older, I want to be like you, both of you. Standing up for what's right, even when it's terrifying." "Then be exactly that," Caleb said. "The world needs more people willing to fight for truth." They continued alone, reaching Caleb's ranch on a morning when sunlight painted snow with gold and the valley stretched vast and beautiful toward distant peaks. The building stood solid and unchanged, evidence of work and care and stubborn persistence. Lin May dismounted slowly, studying the property with careful attention. "This is what you built, what Thornton wanted to steal. This is what we'll build together now." Caleb helped her down, his arm staying around her waist. "Make it into something neither of us could create alone." They stood in the quiet morning, two people who'd found each other through deception and crisis, who'd survived impossible odds through courage and desperate faith, who'd chosen truth over safety and partnership over solitude. The ranch waited, ready for whatever they would make it become. Lin May looked up at Caleb, her expression carrying peace that had eluded her for years. "I wrote in those letters about finding dignity in small things, about building through honest work, about hope that somewhere there existed a place where being real mattered more than being safe. And I think I finally found it. Found you. Found us." She leaned against him, her head resting on his shoulder. "Found home." "Home," Caleb repeated, the word feeling right in ways he hadn't anticipated. "Not what I expected. Better than what I planned." They walked toward the cabin together, partners in truth, ready to begin the difficult and joyful work of building a life that belonged to both of them. Behind them, the valley spread wide and waiting. Ahead, the future opened with possibility. The letters that had brought them together through deception had led them to something more honest than either had imagined possible. The woman who wasn't his bride had become the partner he'd needed without knowing. And in the quiet dignity of winter morning, in the solid reality of home earned through struggle and choice, Caleb and Lin May began their actual story. Not the one he'd ordered from a catalog of distant possibilities, but the one they'd forged together through fire and truth, and the fierce determination to stand firm when everything pushed them to surrender. The better story, the real one, the one that would last.